this is a tutorial. I'd like to talk more about UV lighting, light map baking through UV. I think this is a little bit confusing topic. It's good we'll just spend a little bit more time to talk about it. If you recall last time when we rebuilt this sculpture, even with bouncing up the resolution, it's still the lighting looks, the backlight looks pretty weird. So we did is we exclude this from baking, just set this as a volumetric. So this will look better without the shadow. However, I like to explain a little bit why this is not working. So here, if I open this mesh editor, double click the objects, you can see there's the two UV set. The first one is a 0 and another one is a 1. 0 is the one come in from the default FBX file. So whatever that UV set was made in Rhino or other program just come in into Unreal. The second one is automatically generated by Unreal for the sake of light map. And this one you can see I already regenerated. The way I regenerated is by, in the details, and here you can bouncing up the minimum light map resolution, and then I checked the recompute the normals. I checked the accurate use precision UVs and make sure you generate UV maps. So if you're bouncing up all of these options and bouncing up a higher resolution and hit apply, Unreal is able to recreate this light map. But you can see because the complexity of the geometry, it breaks apart these UVs into very tiny triangles, right? So in this case, it's not gonna work very well because even you have 512 pixel as the resolution, for every single piece of the surface is really small. Maybe it's less than 1 pixel, so it's not gonna be accurate. If you do wanna really, bouncing up, you can maybe double it. Um, so make sure you also check the, you know, uh, recompute tangents, uh, recompute normals. So this is an option will make this more accurate. So here if you apply, Unreal will try to regenerate the map, right? So this maybe could be better. But again, just because the complexity of the geometry, you never get a very clean UV mapping. So that's the problem. We'll bring in these super complicated geometries. Alternative ways actually doing this in Max, Maya, Blender, or even Rhino. You can customize the UV mapping as the way you want. I also want to just let you know by default, I think the normal is not being checked, the precision is not being checked. So this is a little bit quicker to compute, but if you hit apply, but the result is not really as accurate as this one. Okay, so that's just want to show you that's not really a good solution to have a baked UV for this type of objects. Right? So you still have a really break apart pieces. I want to show you what is ideal UV should looks like. So one good example is in the starter content. If I go to architecture, I can see a bunch of geometries. Double click. So this is the wall with the door. If I look at 0, this is the default. Come in with whatever program, it doesn't matter. But the UV channel 1, this is one the light map has used to bake the light. So you see there's no overlapping of this UV set. Every single surface has its own correlate pixels to represent the projection. Okay, so this is ideal. As you can see, if I search light map, the light map is automatically linked to coordinates index 1, which is this, right? So that's this image generate the shadow, the lighting information. And for this one, I double click and type light map. right? It's using the lightmap coordinate 1 as well. So here it's trying to using this one to bake the light. That's the reason you see it doesn't really work very well. What happens if you're using 0? Well, here's a 0, right? 0 is coming from the default, random program. There's a lot of overlapping. So if you do change, let's see 0 as a way, the index 0 to bake the light, let's just want to show you what this looks like. So now if I change this back to default, right? And then if I bake, it probably give you a warning. There are too many overlapping. Okay, so now the bake is done and you get this warning. Sculpture 1 has wrapped UVs and this wrap has a lot of overlapping, right? That's the reason, oh wow, it's actually overlapped 96.7%. So there's a lot of overlapping and the color will not be accurate, right? So you see the reason why you got that kind of error message. Even here, you switch the light map index to 1, which is this one. There's less overlapping, but because the resolution is not very high, you won't really see the benefit. Let me just bouncing this up to this, right? Light map resolution to 1024. I will save it, and then I will re-bake. Let me just build this with a little bit lower. Well, this is medium quality. That's fun. Right, you won't see that overlapping UV warning, but still the resolution of the light map is not ideal. I will still have overlapping. It's only 1.4%. That's acceptable. Right? You see, it's better, but it's not ideal. All right. So hopefully, I think you understand the dilemmas here. In my opinion, the best way you can just do is exclude this guy from the baking. So that will be the easiest solution. Or another solution is don't really create a geometry as complex as this one, because this one will not be able to interact with the lighting. There's other possibilities to exclude. Let me show you. If you make the objects as movable, or let me just do this really quick. Light map. I'll change this to volumetric. So if you in the future you can also make this one as a movable, so that will exclude this from the baking as a static. But anyway, I will just change this back now to static with volumetric for light map. All right, so I will talk really quick how to do a really good UV, with a low poly geometries, not a super complicated like this one. So first, if you look at the starter content, let's go to architecture. There's a bunch of good one here. If I'm using any of these to take a look, right, you'll see the UV has channel 0, which is default, and channel 1. So I want to show you how to create this type of automatic light map. This is really simple. If you do nothing, if you just create a geometry, so this is Rhino, I use poly surface, big box, subtract with the smaller box. So this is the poly surface. Then I convert this poly surface into a mesh using the minimum number of polygons. Then I move this mesh to 0, 0, right here. So this mesh do not have any UV customized UV mapping yet. The reason I can tell is if you select object and then in the properties, you can see this guy. If you check these multiple mapping channels, you see it has a default called surface. This is really come from the default construction history. To view the current default surface mapping, you can go to UV editor, create a window. You see that is the current default looks like. Okay, so if you don't do anything, this is the default, which not bad at all. And then make sure you cancel, right? So you can get out from this editor mode. So now if I just transfer this guy into Unreal, this has only a default surface UV set. It's not customized. So let's see. So export selected. I will give this one name wall door 01 FBX, right? Motion Builder FBX. Everything's default. So here in Unreal, I go to my TM folder. Then I will go ahead import, and I will find this one, wall door 01. Right? In this window, make sure you check this option. I think by default, this is checked, is generate lightmap UVs. Right? So it's automatically create a new channel, channel 1, to host the UV for lightmap baking in the future. So if you have this option on, then you choose import all. Give you some warning, that's okay. Close it. So now you have this object. If I double click in UV0, right? So this is something familiar, right? This is exactly the same as the current surface mapping, right? If you recall, create this, right? That's exactly the same. If you compare, exactly the same, right? Just make sure you cancel that. And plus, on top of 0, you have 1. So 1 is the customized, is the automatically generated by Unreal. So that's gonna be the way to host the light map. So this is super smart. You don't really have to do anything. Everything is automatic. In the future, if you do think, well, I need a better resolution, or I need, you know, a different, pointer to the original instead of the new one, you can customize from here. You can choose source light map, you can reapply, you can change the resolution, right, to bouncing up. So there's the tons of options here you can manipulate. So here, if I type light map, right, you can see by default this is already switched to index 1, but you can switch to index 0 if you think your original one is better. And here you can bouncing up resolution. Okay, so for me, I just keep everything as a default. I will just simply drag this object into the level. I will change the scale to 0. Maybe 1. Okay, so it's smaller, and I will just bake to see how the performance looks like. Okay, so rotate 90 degree. Maybe just move a little bit. It's half in the shadow. Okay, so now let me just get rid of this one just for the sake of baking. All right, so this one is a half in the shadow. So now if I go ahead bake, I build lights only, you should see the shadow will show up perfectly. It should be much faster now. All right, the light baking is done. Okay, so light baking is done, right? So see the shadow is correct, is right here. Everything looks pretty good. So that's how you can transfer the geometry in with the correct UV. In the future, if you do customize your UV, for example, I want to do a box mapping. This is the most popular one, right? And I want to create a really big box contain these geometries. And the cap is yes, enter. Mapping channel, I want to do 1, so let's replace the current surface. Yeah, let's do an experiment. What happens if I do 2? Okay, so now you have a box mapping into channel 2, right? And then if I take a look at the UV editor, right, you see this one showed up. So this is the box mapping. there's definitely some overlapping here, right? There's overlapping here. Cancel that. You can see, if I make a selections, there's one set here, there's another set here, there's overlapping, right? So if I cancel that editor, so now if I export this guy again into the same FBX, okay, then in Unreal, I will right click, re-import. Okay, so now in the UV channel 0, right, you'll see this new updated box mapping being used in channel 0. But you still have channel 1, which is the default light map UVs. So that's still pretty good. So as long as you keep the current light map, right, linked to index 1, you are okay. But in the future, if you, for example, they did a 0, which has the overlapping, you will have some error warning message tell you there's a 50% of overlapping. So just make sure you understand the relation of this. In my opinion, you should always do low polygon modeling, and just make sure whenever you compute the lighting, you always using the correct UV channels. If the model is not too complicated, Unreal should do a pretty good job to automatically unwrap and create a good light map for you. And sometimes you just simply need to rebuild the lights, and then you'll see the result. I do want to show you one more thing. Well, what if you want to create unwrapped UV in Rhino? Well, the short answer is you don't have to, because the Unreal automatically create unwrapped UV set for later when you transfer to Unreal, it create a light map automatically. But if you want to do it manually, it is still possible. So if you delete whatever the original, the UV mapping, the box mapping, or the whatever you should have this default called surface, right? It's actually not too bad. But in some case, if you want to customize the unwrap, it's still doable. You can click unwrap and ask you to create a seam. Seam is the concept I can show you. If you click edge, the edge turns to yellow color. So that means this could be the place you're gonna break apart the geometry. So if you really follow the edges, right, you can manually define, hey, this is the edge I want to break apart the geometry when I do mapping. And the back side, you probably want to do the same thing. So if this is a really simple shape like this, you can manually define the seams, right? Once you do that, then you can use enter to finish. You're done. So you have this customized UV mapping. In order to see that, you can create this UV editor. You can drag a window. You can see this is basically quite different because I'm using seams. So the seams automatically, break this into one set, and here's another set, right? And also all the edges, they have some overlapping here, but it's not too bad. You have this front and the back, right? They have exactly the correct seams. So this could be a way if you want to manually do this UV setting by yourself. In whatever program, you can definitely do that. Then when you transfer Unreal, maybe you don't need to use its new automatic generated light map UV. You can just use your own UV. But I will leave that to you. If you delete, right, this is going back to the cancel. So you're going back to the default surface. And if I do it again, so this time I probably will, I don't know, maybe I will break the seam in a different way. Um, Maybe I will, break both the front, right? And also I want to break the back. Right? So this will be a complete loop. Also, I will break some of these edges. So one edge here, maybe one edge here, maybe one edge here, maybe one edge here, maybe one edge here. So if you have all of these edge break apart. Now enter finish, drag it, right? See this part, now we have very nice organized UV. There's no overlapping anymore, right? That's pretty nice. So then I will go ahead and export this. I think this is good. We just do the demo. So I export the new FBX. I will just overwrite the old one. Okay. So now in Unreal, right here, I will right click, re-import. Done. Right. So for this new one, if I switch the UV, you can see UV 0. It's not bad, right? This is the one I customized by breaking the seams. And this one is automatic generated by Unreal. So let's try. If I force the light map to use my 0 instead of 1, so save it. Right? So I'm using 0 to bake the light. Let's take a look at the result. Right? So here is already switched, and then I have to rebake the light. Right? I think the result will be fine. We'll see. Okay, see, not bad, right? It carried all the pieces with the correct UV setting. That's very nice, actually. All right, so now you understand you could actually customize a UV, and then in Unreal you can mandatory link the mapping into the a different channel. So just here you have options to switch from 1 to 0. All right, so let's continue. Once you have this unwrapped customized UV, there are a couple of things you can do to, if I create this UV editor, you can see on the top wheel, this is my current UV. There's some way you can bring this into Photoshop, and then later you can create an image and use that texture to create the material. So I can show you really quick how to do that. First, I will just simply snap the screen using the snipping tool to create an image. Right? Then I bring that image into Photoshop. Then I will be able to paint the image based on whatever I want to create this material. Just keep in mind this is the layout of the three-dimension surface. You want to be careful about it. So to save time, here I already in Photoshop created a really simple, as you can see, this is original layout, and then I just drew something here. Then I put some images, so that kind of match the layout of the wall. So this is the front, this is the back, some graffiti work. Also, I create this kind of white color for overall. All right. So if I generate this as an image, you can imagine this layout will be overlaid on top, right? So let me save it. I will save this as a JPEG. Before you do that, just make sure the image size. Ideally, you want to do. Let's see. Let me save as a JPEG first. So let me save as a copy. Then I will reduce the resolution. Okay. So save as a copy. I will give this guy name graffiti JPEG. That's fine. Then I will open this JPEG. Okay. Then I'm open. Let me just change the image size. In Unreal, the best way to define the resolution is the power of 2. So I will do this 1024. Okay, so a few pixel off, that's fine. All right, and then I click OK. So this is basically squared 1024. Then to see it in, if you want to see the image in uh, Rhino, you can basically apply the texture, right, using the material. I don't have a material yet, so let's go ahead, create one. So here in the rendering, I will go ahead. So this is a material editor. I'm going to, I will just using a new one, create. I will do a custom, and then I will give the color texture. So for the color, I'm gonna link directly into the graffiti. Right. So this is the image, graffiti, 100%. In the future, if you want to create like a bump, normal map, you can definitely do that as well. Then I'm going to switch to shades. Then I will go ahead apply to objects. Right? So this is applied to the objects. If I go to the rendered view, you basically can see this showed up immediately. So this is a benefit to using this called unwrapped UV, right? Because you can customize the wall any way you like. Then let me export this selection into FBX, right? So this is the again wall door 01, FBX, yes. Click OK. So keep in mind, this should be something we can easily link back to Unreal. So here I will right click, re-import. Re-import material, conflict with resolution. I would do reset to FBX. Let me save everything first. Okay. Then let me re-import one more time. Okay. So really depends. Sometimes the FBX should carry the images as a texture. Sometimes doesn't. Really depends on which software you are using. If you, for example, using 3ds Max or Maya, it will generate the images. I think the Rhino should do that as well. Not sure why that image is not being embedded. So let me do this one more time, re-import. If not, we can manually import, it's not a big deal. Let me re-import with new file. Let's just choose this. Okay, well, for some reason, I think the image is not showing up, but that's okay. We can just simply manually drag it in. So this is the graffiti, right? So drag in, right here. And then I can right click, I can create a material based on it. Let's give this name graffiti MAT. All right. And then I will save all. So basically this is how you apply the material. So for this static mesh, let me just docking this on the top. If I select the graffiti mat, right, and here I will just simply click load, right, use selected asset. So this will show up. Right? As you can see, this is exactly the same as the one we did in Photoshop. So you have one graffiti, two graffiti, right? This looks awesome. Then I will see the update on the view, exactly the same. I will select save all. Right? If you want to double check the UV mapping, we should have UV mapping channel 0, right, which is the one we did Photoshop painting, which has this graffiti there. And the UV channel 1, this is one we have the automatic generated with Unreal. So let me just do the conventional way, light map. I want to make sure light map coordinate index is 1. So this one is connected to the Unreal version, right? And the channel 0 is connected to the actual material. So let's just bake the light one more time, then you can see the change. Build the lights. That's the benefit to using this unwrapped UV. If you use Maya Max and Blender, I think it's the same name, unwrap UV. It should allow you to directly, use it. So here you can see the graffiti on both sides. I think that's it about the graffiti one. Then let's go back to Rhino. I will just duplicate another one. Let's go back to shades. Okay, I will show you like with a typical brick or other material, you probably don't need. So I made the duplication. I will hide the original one. So this is the new one. For the new one, I will just create a new material. I will give maybe a plaster. And then for the texture, I probably will just simply do, oh, I will do a customize. I think this is the easiest way. So I'll give this name as a break, for example. Right? So here for the color, I can go ahead click to an image of break. I wonder if we have a library of break. Let me check really quick. Do we have physical based? No, I don't think that's the one. Um, yeah, I don't see there is break texture here. But anyway, we can do it from scratch. Right? So here's a break. And texture, I will go ahead link to a break texture. If you just simply Google it, you can find tons of material here. I will just grab one. Okay, so I will go to new. Right, so this is the break material. I will save it as break. Okay. Typically in Photoshop, you should be able to open the break. You can do some editing. Usually, I want to make this as 256, right? The power of 2. All right, so this is the break material. And then I will save it again. Then here back to Rhino, I'm going to link right the texture to break. So this is the break texture. Then I will apply to this object. So now if I switch to rendered, you see the break is actually really big. The reason is we still have the original customized UV, right? So this is actually not good for break. In this case, I will go ahead delete right, this mapping. As soon as you delete, it's going back to the surface, which looks a little bit better, but again, the scale probably not right. So this is a couple of ways you can do. In my opinion, the box mapping is the best way. So if you do box mapping, and then you define box, right? If you switch to the shaded view, so this is the box. Click enter yes channel to 1 fun, right? So I create this kind of box channel now. Now if I switch to rendered, you'll see the scale is correct, right? This is the best way you can do if that's a repetitive tiled pattern, you just do a box mapping. Then I'm going to export this again into a new, let's give this guy as wall door 02. Okay, so they have exactly the same geometry but different UV mapping. Right? So here I will right click, import. Right? I will import the new door 2. Same thing, right? If I ask you what do you want to bring in, I want to automatically generate light map. Everything is default. Okay. Um, okay. And then import. Um, don't worry about this warning. Oh, the texture name clash. Yep, because the texture probably using the exactly the same name. So we'll see. Close. Right. You actually got this texture embedded in that FBX. So that's good. Still not sure why the last time doesn't carry in the material. But anyway, you have the break texture, you have the break material, right? So save all. And also you have this static mesh. So if I look at this, looks perfect. And if I look at the UV, 0 is the default from the tiled break, right? The reason you see this gray colored window, there's no UV because the UV is much larger than this window. This window represent UV setting as 1 by 1. Because we did a tile, the actual UV is much larger. The way I can actually show you, since this part could be confusing, is if you really want to see it, create a map, right? UV editor, right? You can see this one is actually all not relevant to the actual break. Is much larger. That's the reason you have this tiled shape. So don't worry too much if you see the UV is not showing up in Unreal. It's totally fine. The most important part is the UV channel 1, which is one we use for baking the light. So it's automatically generated. It's still the same. So what I will do is save all. Then I'm going to drag this here. And same thing, I will give the scale as 0.1. And then I will put it here. So we can definitely see they should be able to casting shadow to each other. This will be a good way to test. So just make this one a little bit higher. Okay. All right. So let's see if that works. In this one, we're casting the shadow. Let's just make it a little bit, yep, overlapping. So I'll put it here, right? So this break should casting some shadow from the white wall. All right. So let's go ahead, build the lights. So you can see the channel 0, you have the break UV, right? And the channel 1 is the light map UV. We'll see both. Completed. Cool, right? You see the shadow on this wall, right? And also you see the break as a tiled material. Okay, so I think that's covered everything about UV set and the texture mapping. I think this is really, really powerful in Unreal. You can have customized UV, right? Come from the Rhino, you can do graffiti, you can do tiled UV box mapping, which is ideal for break and the repetitive patterns. And also, whenever you bring in a static mesh in, it automatically generates a light map UV. Later, you can bake the light. The only limitation is if you have super complicated geometries like this, it will be difficult to generate a good UV for it. So be careful when you have like thousands of pieces. Even you break it apart, it still have a hard time to generate a good lighting, good shadows. I think that's it. A small thing just to highlight. So this is the FBX file we generated from Rhino. Just make sure, because when you export FBX, it's actually embedded the material with it. So whenever you double click and open it, you actually can see it in a 3D viewer in Windows. And also you can see this is the FBX file. It's associated with a folder called FBM, which is a FBX file material. In that one, you can actually see the image. The same thing for the brick. This is FBX file for the brick wall, right? If I double click, you see the 3D viewer, and also you see this photo is automatically generated. So whenever you bring this FBX file into Unreal, it's automatically respect the relationship between the geometry as well as the actual material, which is associated with FBX. So it should be automatically recognizable into Unreal just by dragging the FBX in. The material will go associated with it will be created automatically in